Good evening. Sorry for the late commencement of this meeting, but welcome to this edition of the Planning Committee. To those that are here tonight, to officers, members, those that may be watching online, and those that are joining us from the audience. So I haven't been made of any fire drills that are going to be practiced tonight, but in the event that they do happen, the alarms sound, please make your way to the nearest exit to your left there and to the front of the building to assemble in the front of that. So thank you very much for that. First item of business, we have apologies. I have two apologies from Councillor Beeston and also Councillor Gillian Burnett-Faulkner, who I believe is substituted by Councillor Sweeney tonight. Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Do we have any further apologies? That's a negative. Thank you very much. That brings us on to the declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest on the agenda tonight? Looking around, I can't see any raised. Thank you. Next item of business is the minutes of the previous meeting that was held on the 20th of May 2025. Are we agreed that that's a true and accurate record of proceedings that evening? If so, can I see a show of hands in support of that, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. First substantive item on the agenda tonight, item 4, found on page 9 to 22 of your agenda packs, is application for major development land north of Muckleston Lane and east of Rock Lane, Loggerheads. And I believe we have a presentation on that.
Thank you, Chair. Sharing. Bear me a second. Stop sharing. Lovely, thank you. Okay, yeah, right. Okay, so the application relates to the approval of reserve matters following the granting of outline consent on appeal last year. Oh, sorry, it's still not come up, has it? There you go. Yeah.
Put it on to.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. That's better, isn't it? Right, so yes, so we're talking of the Shropshire Homes site off Muckleston Lane in Loggerheads. So as you can see here on the screen, the site's outlined in red. And we're talking of the land on this plan here, which is the fields shown by my cursor. So it abuts an existing residential development, and then there's established residential housing to the south. And then we also have a listed building, which lies to the east of the site. And here's a view of the front of the site looking towards the site with the existing housing development. And then this is the listed building that lies to the east. Essentially, what the inspector found in allowing the appeal for the outline permission was that the planning application wouldn't actually have an adverse impact on the setting of the listed building, largely due to the separation distance involved, the sort of heights of the buildings that were proposed now, and we can see the listed building is around about here. Although the outline permission only granted consent for access, it did provide an illustrative plan of the proposed layout and the conditions of that outline consent. included reference to its illustrative plan. So if you look on the slide in front of you now, the plan on the left-hand side of that image is the illustrative plan which form part of the outline application, and then the detailed planning application, which is before committee tonight, is the one on the right-hand side. So as you can see, the layout is it reflects the illustrative plan on the outline consent, which the inspector gave weight to in the determination of the original outline permission. In fact, the actual layout is slightly enhanced because there's some improvements to connectivity. So if you can see in the top corner of this screen, there's actually a link road that links through there, whereas in the illustrative plan it was like a dead end. And also there's some sort of improvements to connectivity here as well. So in general terms, the layout is considered by officers to be acceptable, and we're looking at a range of two-storey and single-storey dwellings. So it's a real mix of semi-detached, two-bed, three-bed, four-bed houses, detached bungalows. I've just got a sort of flavour of the house types here, but there are a significantly greater number of house types proposed. This is over 20 different house types, I would say. And so, yeah, so if we go back to the layout, there's also large areas of open space along the boundaries, play areas here as well. The density of the development is quite low given the extent of landscaping and public open space areas, provision of the play areas as well. And there's a frontage development onto Muckleston Wood Lane here, which is set back slightly from the road, so it doesn't appear too overbearing, but does provide a sort of frontage to the development. There's also a variety of different house types, which the council's housing officer is happy with in terms of the mix and how that relates to housing needs in the district. Therefore, its planning permission is recommended subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you very much for that. Before I open the debate, we have a speaker on this item, Mr. Rob Perrins of Shropshire Homes, who's obviously in support of the scheme. Would you like to come forward, sir? For 5 minutes to make your case. You may begin when you're ready by pressing the button in front of you. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and fellow committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to address this evening's meeting. My name is Rob Perrins and I'm the Technical Director at Shropshire Homes Limited. Members will have reviewed the report from your planning officers, which recommends approval of this reserve matters application. As you will be aware, the Associate Outline Planning Permission has already established the principle of residential development at this location for up to 150 dwellings and provision of a new access from Muckleston Wood Lane. The reserved matters application before you today relates to the internal access arrangements, design, layout, scale, appearance and landscaping only. The proposal is fully consistent with the principles set out in the design and access statement and the illustrative master plan as approved under the outline planning permission. The design complies with both national and local planning policy requirements relating to housing, urban design, environmental and technical matters. We also note the approval of additional plans responding to officers' comments on refuse vehicle tracking, landscaping and secure by design. It also reflects the emerging allocation of the site for residential development. Matters such as flood risk, drainage, ecology, biodiversity and heritage were thoroughly considered and approved at the outline stage, and no statutory consultee raises any objections to this reserve matters application. This proposal will deliver a high quality residential development that includes generous amounts of open space that are above the level required in the emerging policy. It will achieve biodiversity net gain that exceeds the 10% minimum mandated and will provide 30% affordable housing, exceeding the current policy requirement by 5%. A signed Section 106 agreement was completed as part of the outline planning permission. This requires financial contributions towards secondary school education, healthcare, bus services and the provision and construction of a multi-purpose games area within Loggerheads. Shropshire Homes are a privately owned local house builder. We employ people living in Staffordshire, Shropshire and the wider area, and this development is very important to us. We take pride in ensuring we deliver on our promises to local authorities and communities, and we sincerely hope that members will support your office's recommendation to approve this application subject to planning conditions. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Perrins. First point to just draw members' attention, there is a supplementary agenda item to this application. I trust you're all familiar with this, and I'll now open it up for debate. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Broadly speaking, what we've seen seems to me acceptable given the appeal situation. I'm slightly worried about the description of housing as something plain and unfussy, something like that, which is a sort of long way of saying bland, isn't it, at the end of the day? But I'm more interested in a paragraph in the highway safety section of the report. This is the paragraph that begins, a clear road hierarchy is provided. I note in it, it says there are several, quote, quiet lanes where a more informal approach has been taken. Am I correct in saying that those are not going to be adopted? And again, I'd be very grateful if the officer could provide us with data as to how many of the proposed dwellings will be on unadopted highways. This, of course, has a major impact on residents who will have to carry bins at the convenience of the developer who's saving money in this regard. And I'd be intrigued to know how many people are going to suffer for that penny pinching.
Thank you, Councillor Fear.
Thanks, Councillor Fear. Where did I do it? Do I need to go back? I think. Sorry, I'll get there in a minute. Okay, there we go. Is this? Is that not working? Not really. Just that one there, yeah. Listen. That's doing it, it's nothing. Huh? Sorry about the technical issues there. Yes. Shall I start? I can do verbally answers.
Yeah.
Shall I start, Councillor Fear? Yeah, we'll get the IT sorted. Essentially, yeah, there is going to be sort of a clear road hierarchy and those private lanes. So essentially what's going to happen is that the refuse vehicles plan we've got, which hopefully we'll bring up in a minute, shows the adopted sections of the roads. There are small sections which potentially won't be adopted. So there will be a small number of dwellings within that section of road, but there have got bin collection points positioned.
I'm quite aware of how this is done. I'm interested to know how many properties won't have collection from their frontage.
I can't.
Information.
I can't until we have the plans and I can see the.
Yeah.
I can't really confirm that. Here we are. Yes. Oh, thank you. Right. Cheers, Jacob. So here we have the plan for this is the vehicle tracking for the refuse vehicles plan. If you can see here, the gaps between the green sort of tracking details are the properties that won't. Oh, something. You zoom in at the bottom, yeah. Right. Sorry about the technology here. So
We just have to go off.
yeah. So thanks, Jacob. So yeah. So essentially, the areas are. Is that any better? Can you see that a bit clearer, or? Yeah. So it's these gaps. If you can see my cursor here, it's that these gaps here which won't have direct frontage access. So if you go across the site, you can see that there's these here. So you're talking of a relatively small number of properties that won't have direct access. You know, you're talking, so all these properties have, so you're talking in single figures of dwellings that won't have bins collected directly from outside their properties. So you're talking of, for example, on this, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 houses there. At the top of the site, there's 1, 2, 3 houses there, so 7. And then there's this line of properties here, so 12. So you're potentially talking, and there's 2 more, 14, and then 15. This one here, so yeah, 15 out of 138 properties wouldn't have direct frontage access, but there would be bin collection points within close proximity of those properties, which are all within the required distance. So the maximum distance to manoeuvre your bins about 30 metres. That's the sort of industry standard. So they're all well within that.
Councillor Fee, does that answer your question?
Well, sort of. It's not single figures, of course, is it? It's substantially more than single figures, so it's nice to have a bit of accuracy. I'm also a little bit intrigued that some of these roads seem to be on the large plan, the loop roads. So in other words, with some of these estates, the unadopted highway has been a sort of branch road running off one of the major roads. Here I don't really understand why the developer cannot make the entire loop. We see one there at the bottom, it's got a gap in for some peculiar reason. I think one at the top has a gap in as well. And I really don't see what this inconvenience is for, apart from to save a bit of money. I do think this is unsatisfactory in that regard.
Thank you, Councillor Fee. Councillor Amy Bryan.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with Councillor Fee. The one to the right of the site looks to, if we can go up, please, looks, as Councillor Fee just says, like it just stops. The road doesn't narrow, or there isn't a historic tree that we're going around. It just stops with a gap. Would there be any reason from a planning point of view that would be the case? A justified reason?
We don't know the reason for that. We've not asked that question, and so we don't know the answer. And we've not asked that question because we consider that such a small number of dwellings with relatively limited distance to take their bins out of a significant scale size site like this is an appropriate situation.
If I can just ask a follow-on question, Chair. So I don't know a great deal about bin wagons. Apologies, David. But would the bin wagon turn around, or would the bin wagon do a full loop? Because if they would be doing a loop, why wouldn't they be collecting the bins? But then from a logistics point of view, I can't imagine that they could turn around in that area. So I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, if you look at the vehicle tracking on this plan, that is the manoeuvring of the refuse vehicles. So that's how they would manoeuvre into those areas, well, manoeuvre into and then manoeuvre out of those areas. So, for example, this is here. So say the refuse vehicle was travelling in this direction, it would come up here, collect the bins, reverse back down, and then come down here to these. So that's how it generally tends to operate on sort of modern residential developments. It's pretty standard practice. And the Highway Authority, you know, they're generally happy with the road layout. It complies with Manual for Streets and the necessary requirements in terms of road layouts. So the Highway Authority have obviously looked at that in great detail as the specialists in road design, and they're happy with that layout.
Councillor Nick Crisp.
Thank you, Chair. So can you clarify then? So somebody might be in a house with the same house as their neighbour, then the neighbour takes theirs to a bin collection point, but you take yours to the end of the driveway. Is that the sort of situation that's going to occur here? Although there's no difference between the houses, or?
That's exactly what would happen, and it's sort of a common occurrence that does happen in lots of places. So you will see it on smaller scale residential developments where they've got bin collection points because you haven't got adopted highways leading through into the development. So they will have a collection point on the main road or at the site entrance, so the bin lorries don't actually need to go into the site. So you'll have those, and then you may have existing dwellings where everyone puts their bins out on the main road.
But this is not that, is it? This is like they drive round and then they stop, and then there's a gap. I mean, I don't obviously have as much experience as the officers, but I've never seen anything like this. This is very bizarre. And normally the unadopted roads are they're like a road on their own, but this is it's like breaking. I don't understand. It doesn't seem to facilitate the collection of the bins at all. I don't see the point of it, other than obviously just to save a bit of cash.
Councillor Holland.
Chair, it seems to me Councillor Crisp has a very short memory, because he may not have seen anything like this, but I remember seeing this at our last meeting in relation to another planning application. The answer to Councillor's confusion, I think, is that the only thing preventing our bin wagons from simply completing a loop, from moving forward as they do along other streets and collecting every bin from its driveway end, the only thing preventing our wagons from doing that is our policy of not sending our bin wagons up unadopted highway. Could our officers explain why we would not be entitled in this case to require that all of those loop roads are constructed to an adoptable standard and thereafter be adopted? Because as we discussed at outline stage, I know that the inspector didn't agree with us, but we did talk about it. This is pristine land. This isn't an application for infill development or an application on a challenging site where highways have to be designed in an ingenuitive way in order to make the development take place. It is clearly possible for highways on this application to be delivered to an adoptable standard. I've been critical of the Highways Authority in the past for not perhaps investigating planning applications that come before this authority in as much detail as I would like. There has been a change of political leadership at the County Council, at the Highways Authority, and we were assured by a political friend of that new leadership that the Highways Authority would start to take a different view on such matters. But can our officers tell us, I know we have policies, is there a reason why we cannot simply say you must construct these highways to an adoptable standard? Because in my mind, in addition to the inconvenience for residents of having to carry their bins, I agree a policy compliant distance, albeit we've discussed in the past that you double or quadruple any number that you come up with to determine that distance, because you've got to take your bins out and put them back. And for every journey you make outward with a bin, unless you have the benefit of the power of teleportation, you do have yourself to walk back to your point of origin. So I'd like to know why we can't ask for that to be the case. I really think it ought to be on development of this kind. It's not just the inconvenience. Every time our vehicles, every time our wagons have to reverse around a corner, that is danger. That is added hazard to residents who are entitled to expect amenity from the homes and the areas that they live in. And it's dangerous for children. I know our wagon drivers and our bin collectors, our refuse people are the best. They are the top at their craft, and that our wagons are fully equipped with cameras. But why would they have to do that manoeuvre? It makes no sense to me that this very basic amenity for potential residents cannot be created in a straightforward manner.
I'd like to come back on that, please.
Well, I don't believe that we could require that by a condition of this planning permission. So we would, probably the best option would be that we defer determination of the application and we enter into discussions with the developer. I don't believe that we can tell them that they've got to do it. Obviously, they've heard the discussion tonight. There may be some technical reasons why they're unable to do that. I don't know the answer to that, but we could certainly enter into discussions and ask them if they are able to do that. If they're willing and able to do that, then clearly they could submit revised plans and we could bring the scheme back before the planning committee at a later date. If they say that they're not willing to do that or they're unable to do that for whatever reason, then again we would have to come back to the committee and explain that, and then members would be able to make a decision based on the information that they'd have.
Councillor Holland.
Much as I'm loath to propose deferral, I feel as though this is an issue that comes before us on a regular basis. I think if the applicant's representative is listening tonight, we would very strongly like to see adoptable highways where possible, not just because those are desirable for our residents, but also because it helps us to deliver our core services as a council. Looking at the application, I can see that some of those properties to the northwest of the site are on a branch. And in the past, it's been the case that we've not required that for a branch, but to the northeast of the site, that is a complete loop. To the east of the site, that is a complete loop. I'm curious, having looked at it now close up, that northeastern, so to the west of the site, there is a swept path analysis at a sort of T-junction to the extreme west. Then there's a gap. And then there is adoptable or adopted highway, we expect, junctioning off. Now, again, unless our vehicles can teleport, surely all of that road will have to be adoptable. Does that make sense? I mean, are officers looking at the same bit that I'm looking at? Because it may be that the map that we're looking at only shows the turning parts and does not show the straights, in which case deferral is unnecessary because we could be receiving assurance tonight. But so, for example, that on the extreme left, that is a branch. In order to collect bins from that little colourful island, refuse vehicles will have to traverse the intervening part. And will only do so if it's adopted highway, as I understand it, in accordance with our policy. So I would like clarity on that. And if we can't have it tonight, I move deferral. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Any other speakers on this, please? Councillor Williams, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, add to Councillor Holland's comments, the cost to the borough, the time spent of our operatives on that estate will be quite an excess on other estates where they can move in a forward position. Reversing, as has been mentioned, is dangerous. But it's all, you know, and the roads are not that wide. They're up to standard with the county council, but we know they're not really that wide, and it is a danger. And reversing has been said, but also the time spent by our operatives on that estate. But could I just mention a small matter, really? The entrance to Rock Lane, the pedestrian entrance to Rock Lane. Can we make sure that it's people with disabilities? We don't want a stile putting in there, but we want a gate where people on the street can go onto Rock Lane with the buggies or whatever. Because there's a lot of cases here, we've got it in my patch now, where they've got these A-frames and people with disabilities with their scooters cannot get through. So it's a small matter, but I think it's an important one for people's rights. Can we put that as a recommendation or whatever? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, just to come back on that point, yes, absolutely. I'm sure that is the intention, that it will be designed so that it's accessible for people with disabilities, but we can certainly go back to them and yeah.
I'm not sure if Councillor Williams has seconded Councillor Holland's deferral, but I would like to second the deferral. I'm not happy with any bin wagon reversing. We do have a procedure where the driver stays in the truck, obviously, and all the loaders walk beside the truck. So then all the driver, when it's being reversed, thinks about is vehicles. The loaders then walk with the truck and they'll take care of dogs, cats and pedestrians. But it's not ideal how many reversins we've got to do in that section in that development is just unacceptable. And I would like a list of how many exactly houses would be serviced the bins, how many would be on an adopted highway. I'd like information on where the bin collections would be. And I'd like to see a bit more information on this reversing that it just seems quite comical, expecting the bin vehicles to go forward a bit and then reverse and then go forward a bit in a different direction and then reverse. It's like you're asking them to do a dance. And I think that's completely unacceptable. And I would like to see more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for your clarity on that. Councillor Holland.
I'm very grateful to the applicant's representative. I'm afraid our protocol doesn't allow further participation. I am now wearing my zooming in goggles. I can say that the branch I was looking at is indicated with the name Tertiary Street, and the blank part of it in between the little colourful turning circles would include plots 78 through 83. And my guess, again, looking at the plan, is that will be adoptable or adopted, but it's not clear from the plan that we're being shown on the screen. What is clear also, if you zoom in a great deal, are the bin collection points, their location and size. So some of what we're asking for would be possible for councillors to see if we had eyes of the hawk tonight. But it would be helpful if we could revisit this then at our next meeting with a proper diagram and you know, officers who've really gone into detail in relation to the bin collection and the refuse collection elements. I am sorry for delaying. I have moved deferral, and thanks to Councillor Hutchison for seconding that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Do I see any other councillor wishing to speak on this? Okay, in the absence of any other proposals, so we've had it proposed and seconded that we defer this. Are we content that we've got all the information that we need to go back to the developer with? Yeah, okay. So we've had it proposed that we defer this application. Can I see a show of hands, please, in support of this? And that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That item is deferred. Item 5 of the agenda. Plots D2 and D3, Chatterley Park, Peacock Hay Road, Torque. And we've got a presentation on this arriving shortly.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this is the first of two proposals that we'll be considering tonight for reserved matters applications at the Chatterley Valley site. So as the committee are aware, the Chatterley Valley site is an ongoing large commercial development located off Peacock Hay Road in Torque. The wider development site has already been approved at outline stage, but the design and appearance of each commercial plot is required to be assessed at a reserved matters stage. So the only things we can really focus on here are the visual impacts of the proposal and whether the parking arrangements are appropriate. So these two plots will be located on the southern side of the approved spine road. The site would be served by a single point of access, and the car parking and service areas, as you can see on this plan, would be to the front and the side of the buildings. So the building on plot D2 is the smaller of the two units. So it would measure 54 by 95 metres in plan, whilst having a ridge height of approximately 15.7 metres. And that unit would have 61 parking spaces in total. Now, the building proposed on plot 3 in comparison would measure 62 by 155 metres in plan, with a ridge height of 15.9 metres. And that unit would have 105 parking spaces in total. And there is sheltered cycling spaces as well for both units. So in terms of appearance, this is the details of the smaller unit. Its design is based largely on functional requirements, but the use of a colour banding and the relatively modest height for buildings of this nature would ensure that the proposal is seen in context with the wider development site. And the details submitted with the application note that the choice of materials is consistent with modern industrial developments and are resilient options. So that will ensure that they will support the buildings for the lifetime of the development. And here we have the larger unit, which is also follows a similar design style to the first one. So with respect to the choice of colour, it's considered that the use of greys and blues would create interest and rhythm by breaking up the elevations both horizontally and vertically, which would ensure the avoidance of any blank elevations. A landscaping scheme's also been proposed to soften the appearance of the buildings, particularly on the northern and southern boundaries, which would consist of native planting with a mix of hedgerows, mixed scrub and tree planting. So it's important to note, though, that there's more substantial landscaping that will be formed around the wider Chatterley Valley site, but that's required as part of the outline application and not relevant to these reserve matters applications. So moving on to the highways impacts, the proposed access points for both plots will be located at the northwestern corner of the application site off the main Spine Road. The Highways Authority have raised no objections to the proposal, subject to a condition. Given that the proposal meets the council's parking standards, subject to the conditions recommended by the Highways Authority, the proposed development is considered acceptable in highways terms. On that basis, the application is brought to committee with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I believe we have a speaker on this item. Mr. John Brooks. Would you like to come forward, sir? You have 5 minutes to make your case. You may begin when you're ready by pressing the button in front of you.
Thank you, councillors and chair, for the opportunity to speak. I'm John Brooks from WSP. We are the agents and planning consultants on the applications at Chatterley Park, working on behalf of the applicant Harworth. You may recall previously seeing plans for the site from 2019, when the original hybrid permission for the redevelopment of the wider development site was granted, or thereafter where we have presented in support of reserve matters applications for other plots or infrastructure on the site. I would like to thank you for your ongoing support for the development on this allocated employment site. The whole of the site benefits from outline planning permission for industrial, distribution and warehouse uses, and full permission for earthworks, infrastructure, and the creation of development plateaus. If you've been near the site recently, you will have seen that the earthworks have now been completed, and the applicant is now working on securing permissions for built development on the site. The reserve matters for the first phase of development, which will be delivered on plot D1, were approved at committee in June 2023, and construction is expected to be completed in 2026. The applications before you represent the second and third phases of development, which are coming forward on plot C and D2, D3. I've chosen to cover both applications in my speech, given that they fall within the same development site and the similarities between the proposed developments. The plots in the western part of the site, near Peacock Hay Road, the proposals involve 2 buildings on each plot, comprising of an employment floor space of over 20,000 square metres in total across both plots. Confirmed operators are not known at this time, but Harworth has received significant interest from large national and international businesses attracted by the central location in the UK, access to the motorway network, and the ability to service major conurbations in the northwest as well as the east and west Midlands. There has been a range of occupiers with an interest for a variety of unit sizes. Interest so far has been from the likes of the following companies: national and international logistic companies, a pharmaceutical distributor, various manufacturing businesses, a bespoke requirement for glass manufacturing, a vehicle preparation centre for an automotive occupier, and a local business in the medical field looking to amalgamate operations across the northwest to the Stoke/Newcastle area. As demonstrated by these reserve matters applications, Harworth is committed to providing quality employment floor space and new jobs. The proposed buildings have been designed to have a positive impact on the landscape with a high quality and consistent colour and material palette utilised across both plots and the wider Chatterley Park site. Harworth is also targeting BREEAM Excellent with a minimum requirement of Very Good. We have held positive discussions with your council and its consultees prior to submission. This has resulted in a positive committee report in front of you. I hope that you agree with the Planning Department's conclusion that the proposals are policy compliant and their recommendation to grant the approval of the applications. The approval of the applications in front of you today will represent a big step in enabling Harworth to deliver the employment uses on the site to the benefit of Newcastle-under-Lyme. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks, for your contribution. I'll now open it up for debate. Councillors, over to you.
Sorry.
Councillor Gorton.
Network Rail. They're requesting that some sort of agreement be put in place, which I think would give them some sort of say really about the progress of the development. Can I ask, are we confident that we can turn down such a request? Not that I'm advocating that we do so, but are we sure of our ground with Network Rail?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Network Rail have requested that a works agreement be secured through a condition. These plots in themselves are actually a significant distance from the railway line. It's something like the closest one, not this side, it's 160 metres away. So realistically, it's not going to have any impact on that. There may be other plots within the wider site that might have an impact. And at that point, we could look to see if a condition is necessary. But for these ones, it's considered not relevant, to be honest. And I think we can safely say the separation distance is enough. Yeah.
Are you satisfied with that, Councillor? Any other councillor wishing to speak on this? If we've had it proposed by Councillor Williams that we move this, I'm from the chair prepared to second that proposal. Can I see a show of hands, please, in support of this? And that's unanimously in favour. Thank you, councillors. That item is moved. We have agenda item 6, which is plot C at Chatterley Park, Peacock Hay Road, Talk. Over to you, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is obviously the second reserve matters application, which covers plot C of the site. So, like the previous proposal, we're on looking at the design and highways matters for this scheme. And like the similar one, this scheme is also split into 2 separate units. In terms of where the position is, this runs actually north of the main spine road, so opposite the one that's just been approved. So in regards to the unit on plot C, that would measure 48 by 80 metres in plan with a ridge height of 12.3 metres, and that one would have 50 parking spaces in total. The proposed unit on C2 is the smaller of the 2 units, and that would measure 42 by 52 metres in plan, whilst having a ridge height of 13 metres. So that one would have 33 parking spaces in total. You know, as can be seen on the plan, the parking spaces for cars would be in between the 2 buildings, and then the parking and loading areas for larger vehicles would be to the front. So in terms of appearance, these units will follow a similar design style to the last application, using horizontal and vertical colour banding to help break up the elevations of the building. Again, in respect of the actual materials to be used, the material palette would match those of the other units on the site. So the new landscaping would consist of native planting, again, a mix of hedgerows, mixed scrub and tree planting, which would be focused mainly on the north of the site. So and again, with respect to parking, Highways Authority have got no objections to the proposal, subject to conditions. It's policy compliant with our parking requirements, and in the absence of any other relevant issues, the application is brought to this committee with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I'll just open it up to the previous speaker on the previous item, just to see if he wishes to add anything further. That's a negative, thank you. Over to councillors for debate. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies if I've missed this, but unlike the previous application, I couldn't see any reference in the application under discussion, C1 and C2, to any accessible parking spaces. Is that the case, or?
Bear with me 2 seconds. I'll just look at the report. No, there is a mixture of electrical vehicle charging points and motorcycle parking spaces, but no disabled parking spots for this one.
Is that something we should be concerned about, Mr. Chairman?
Ordinarily, yes, it is.
We don't have a policy on it. Normally it's covered by separate legislation from planning. So we certainly can ask for it. It would be preferable, certainly, but I don't think we could force the matter, really.
Perhaps we could ask the developer kindly to satisfy that criteria. Okay, councillors, anybody else wishing to add to the debate? In which case, I'll happily propose that we move this. I just wish to say a big thank you to the developers for working with this council on bringing this online and forward, and I'm sure it'll provide many much needed employment opportunities for people in the area. So with that, I'd like to formally propose that we move this. Do I see a seconder?
I'm happy to second it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Any further comments? Okay, so we've had it proposed and seconded. Can I see a show of hands in support of that, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. That item is also approved. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Brooks. That brings us on to agenda item 7 of the agenda. Building 3 Coaldale Road, Newcastle-under-Lyme.
Bear with me just one moment. I'm having the same technical problems that we were having earlier. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bearing with me. The application is for a change of use at Building 3 Coaldale Road. The applicant is seeking permission for a change of use from what's currently a strictly B2 industrial usage to a mixed B2/B8 industrial and storage and distribution usage. The building is part of a larger industrial estate. There's a wider range of businesses operating with B1, B2 and B8 usages throughout the site, though I understand that the applicant themselves is a manufacturer of steel doors. There's no physical changes to the building itself. It's basically been brought to planning committee by virtue of the fact that it's over a certain size. We've received, this is the building itself, and you can also see here views down Coaldale Road in either direction. We've received no comments from Environmental Health, but the Highways Authority have raised no objections. It's not considered that the change of use would impact amenity or highway safety, and nor any we have no issues with the principle of the development itself, and the application has been brought to the committee today with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Over to members. Councillor Fear.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm happy to move this as it's printed.
Councillor Holland.
Apologies if everyone was hoping to get this one over very rapidly. Could I ask a question about vehicle movements and what assessment has been made of the change of use? I'm particularly interested in storage and distribution. I should declare my interest as well. I'm a resident of the A519 Clayton Road, and I have no end of residents of mine who are very unhappy with the increasing number of heavy goods vehicles that use that road to access sites on the A34, particularly up Chesterton Way. And I'm curious as to whether or not thought has been put in the direction of how many extra vehicle movements and what kind of vehicle movements an additional storage and distribution hub on this industrial estate will cause. Clearly, again, a matter for the Highways Authority, but as in the past, my trust in the Highways Authority who've examined it in detail is limited. Can our officer tell us, has any consideration been given to vehicle movements in the wider area?
Thank you, Councillor Holland. I don't believe that that's the case. The site does benefit from quite a generous car park, but I don't think that there's been anything specifically like what he's talking about.
You satisfied with that, Councillor Holland?
I should be abstaining on the vote. I'm not sure that my residents would want me to vote for more vehicles accessing this site from the M6 junction 15, which I think is a possibility, given that we don't have any information to the contrary.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Any other councillors wishing to speak? No, and that's negative. So in that case, we've had it formally proposed that this item's moved. Again, I'm happy from the chair to second this in the absence of any other proposals in front of us. So can I see a show of hands, please, in support of the proposal as written? Thank you. Can I see abstentions? Against? Thank you. That item is clearly moved. Thank you. Brings us on to item 8 of the agenda tonight, to be found on pages 49 to 62 of your agenda pack. And this is the application for minor development, the Bush Inn, High Street, Silverdale.
Yeah, just sorting the IT out. Just bear with us a second.
The IT needs shooting.
Aha.
Right, okay, cool.
Well,
And
brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Right, so yes, this application relates to the construction of 8 semi-detached 2- and 3-bedroom dwellings, including the formation of a new vehicular access off Ashbourne Drive at the Bush Inn in Silverdale. As you can see on the plan here, the public house, which is this building here, occupies a corner position between High Street and Ashbourne Drive. Essentially, we've got a car park in front of the public house, which I'll show. This is the public house here, which is also a non-designated heritage asset and is on the local list. So we've got an area of parking to the side here, which is the application site. And then we've also got a large car park, which is to be retained here. So the application site, which is subject to this application, lies essentially to the south of the pub on sort of the overspill parking area with the beer garden in this area here, so where my cursor is now. What we've got on this drawing is 2 layouts. The layout on the left-hand side is the layout which members are considering tonight for the 8 semi-detached houses. The layout on the right-hand side of that image is a previous application for 4 detached houses. That was dismissed on appeal due to the potential impact from noise of sort of patrons of the pub using the beer garden and the impact that would potentially have on the occupiers of the new development. It wasn't refused for any other reason. It was purely just down to noise. So as you can see, the layout of the development as proposed now, when you compare it to the layout of the previous scheme, is essentially pretty much identical. All they've done is subdivided the executive style houses into smaller dwellings to reflect a sort of a local need, because there were concerns raised with the previous application that executive houses weren't required in that location, and what was needed was smaller 2 and 3 bed units for the local population. So I think what the applicants have done is they've considered that and therefore provided a development of 8 semi-detached houses. So essentially what we're looking at is the layout in front of you on the left-hand side. The applicant, to address the concerns raised by the inspector in the previous appeal on the site, has carried out further noise surveys when events have been held at the pub, and that noise assessment has confirmed that it wouldn't have a detriment, any events that take place in the pub wouldn't have a detrimental impact on the occupiers of the proposed dwellings. This is supported by the environmental health officer, who raises no objections to the application. We've had a number of concerns from councillors, the parish council, and a couple of neighbouring occupiers that the proposal would represent overdevelopment of the site and the densities are too high. However, I think we would refer members to the density of development in the surrounding area. We've got a lot of terraced houses, semi-detached houses, lots of modern development, which is of a higher density even than this proposal. So as officers, we're satisfied that the layout density of the dwellings would be acceptable. And in terms of the design, again, this is a street scene view from the front. So the dwellings, the design of the dwellings is considered appropriate and in context with its surroundings, and also is well related to the list of buildings, well, not the list of buildings, sorry, the non-designated heritage asset. So it wouldn't impact on the significance of that locally listed building, the public house. So in general terms, the access arrangements and parking arrangements are considered appropriate by the Highway Authority. So permission is recommended, subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Tom, for that presentation. I have a couple of speakers on this item. I'm going to take the objector first, Mr. Henrik Dumchik of Silverdale Parish Council. Would you like to come forward, sir? You have 5 minutes to make your case. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to lodge a formal objection at the committee. Thank you, councillors, for listening to me. The Bush is a jewel of a historic pub built in the 1860s as part of a significant Sneed villa development of 6 houses and a hotel. We're very proud of it, and obviously there's a concern about the conservation issues, but the main reason why we're objecting is because of the density and what we feel is the connection between the relatively high density and the issues about noise impact from the pub affecting future residents. And we'd like to remind you that one of the objectives of planning policy is to resolve conflicts between alternative uses. And here we have a pub and we have residential potential use. The job of Silverdale Parish Council is to represent local residents and therefore we want to make sure that their views are known to the committee. So I've got time to comment in great detail, but obviously there's quite a lot of implications of the density issue. But I just want to make the connection between that and noise. First of all, our case is about numbers. This is a development of 8 semi-detached houses at a residential density of 44 dwellings per hectare. The previous application, which was quashed, it was refused, and the developer's application appeal was quashed, was about noise. In terms of our views, we had a design guidance and code report, and we're citing it as evidence. We do recognise that that report hasn't got the weight that it might have if we had a made neighbourhood plan. We're still developing our neighbourhood plan, but we did spend a lot of time talking to architects for the consultant, and obviously we're disappointed that the view is that it's not got heavy weighting, and therefore it doesn't have a substantive weight. But we think the view is that it is a high density, and for the future of our understanding of how Silverdale's are going to develop over the next 20 years, it should be considered that we've got a 90-page detailed report, and we want that to be utilised on future planning applications. 8 houses is twice the number that was proposed last year, so that's already 100% denser than the previous scheme. There's also more bedrooms. On that metric, it's 25% denser than the previous scheme. So we're saying now that more people are going to be affected by the noise. We do recognise that the pub is not open all the time, but it's open for 78 hours each week. It's open practically half the week. So that's a considerable increase in the number of people who are affected by noise from the pub, and we feel it's
1 minute.
And we feel that's quite an important issue. So whatever the metric, there's less space per household, more chance of neighbourhood conflict, and smaller space in gardens and in turning circles and the general use of the properties. And we believe the developer is pushing the housing to the limit and creating a potential conflict between their own business as a hospitality venue and residents' rights to quiet enjoyment. Silverdale Parish urges the council to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumchuk. You may return to your seat now. Thank you. We now have a supporter of the scheme and slightly unusual circumstances. This is Jenna Lai, and as chair of this committee, I've granted a special dispensation this evening to allow the agent to join by teams this evening. This is an exception, mainly because of the long distance that she would have to travel to make it up here. And my feeling that the agent's contribution will add some value to the meeting. Therefore, I approve this. So have we got Jenna online? Jenna, can you hear me?
Yes, hi. Can everyone hear?
Thank you. You have 5 minutes to make your case, please. You're reminding after 4 minutes that you have 1 minute left. You may begin when you're ready.
Good evening, members. I speak on behalf of the applicant Silverdale Developments Limited, and hopefully members have time to review the committee briefing flyer circulated last Friday. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today in support of the planning application at the land to the rear of the bush for the redevelopment of a brownfield site within the defined settlement boundary to deliver 8 residential dwelling in a sustainable and accessible location close to local services, facilities, and transport link. The scheme before you today is well evidenced and policy compliant. To fully address the inspector comments from the previous appeal, a comprehensive noise impact assessment was undertaken over a full operational weekend at the Bush and supplemented with data from 3 comparable pubs during peak summer use, and as a result, receiving no objection from the Council's Environmental Health Officer and fully supported by your officer. We acknowledge concerns have been raised by Silverdale Parish Council and by 3 third-party representations. These concerns have been addressed through the application documents, technical assessment, and your officer professional evaluation to support approval as summarized below. Turning first to the Parish Council objection to the residential density, the proposal is of approximately 44 dwelling per hectare, which is consistent with other development in the area, as confirmed by your officer, and in accordance with the design guidance and code, which was referenced by the Parish Council, as the density referred in the design and code explicitly excludes significant residential development to the south of the application site. Not to mention that this is a guidance rather than an adopted planning policy that afforded no weight in the assessment here. Moreover, paragraph 130 of the MPPF promotes minimum density rather than maximum densities to ensure development make optimum use of the potential of each site. Particularly, there is an existing housing year-land supply shortfall within Newcastle-under-Lyme. Your officer's report clearly concludes that the proposed level of development is not considered excessive and that there are numerous examples of similar or even higher density housing within the settlement boundary than the current scheme. As such, the proposal sits comfortably within the principles of sustainable and proportionate growth as identified by the MPPF and your officers. Turning to the parking and highway safety, the parish and representative has expressed concern about the site access, traffic generation, and parking provision. These points are addressed directly in the transport statement, and critically, the Council's Highway Authority have raised no objection to the application. Concerns about pressure on local infrastructure have also been raised. However, no technical evidence or supporting representations have been provided to substantiate these claims. Your officer highlights, given the modest scale of the development, it is not considered that it would place an undue burden on such facilities and further confirms that the principle of residential development in this location is considered to be acceptable. The concerns raised by the Parish Council and local residents have been comprehensively addressed through a sensitive design, detailed technical submission, and your officer's extensive review. In conclusion, the proposal to deliver 8 much-needed housing in this sustainable brownfield site is acceptable and fully supported by your officer. We therefore respectfully ask members to support your officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Lai, for your contribution. That ends your contribution for this evening. I'll now throw it over to councillors for debate. Over to you, councillors. Councillor Brown.
Well, I called this in because I was concerned about the density, and that's been comprehensively covered by the chair of the parish council. There has been mention in the supporting statement about no assessment done on effects or demands on existing village infrastructure. Now, I apologise for not being in a position to be able to do a scientific study of this, but if you consider that there was going to be 4 executive four-bedroom executive houses on the previous application that we objected to and which was overturned. If we're now going to have 8, you think of the extra people and the extra demands, because if it's average 4 or 5 people in the house, you're going to have more demands on existing infrastructure in terms of doctors, appointments and schools. You've also got to consider that the roads accessing in and out there are already in a very poor condition, and we get a lot of issues with double parking and with people having great difficulty coming down the road. The final thing I'd like to say is it works both ways with that. We are very proud of the Bush, and it's one of the few businesses and facilities in the village that provides hot meals. And if we set up a situation where complaints arise about noise, access, people coming in and out, we're going to have already, it's very difficult for people to make a go of pub businesses. You know, we're going to set up a situation where the Bush could fail, and I'd be loath to lose that facility. So I stand by the things I called in, the reasons I called it in, and I think it's just too much, too dense in too small an area.
Officers care to come back on that, please?
I think it's covered in the report, Chair.
Thank you. Any councillors wishing to speak on this matter? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to the ward councillor for explaining the reasons for the call in. I think that's the most helpful that a ward councillor can be when calling in an application, is to give an account of why that's been done. In terms of overdevelopment of the site, I suppose there is an argument open to be made there, because the previous refused application was for 4 dwellings and this is for 8. I make no assertions about anybody's position on the previous application, but it does seem a little sorry to me that there are people in Silverdale who objected to the first application because it's executive homes and we don't need executive homes, we need smaller homes, and now object to this application on the grounds of overdevelopment, when it is perhaps the applicant reacting to criticism made of that first application. Can I ask a question related to the noise nuisance? Because I think that is probably the most important issue to consider given the previous planning history. So we refused it last time for homes, 4 dwellings. The inspector refused it, and our report tells us that the inspector refused it because noise mitigation would have been inadequate. But the report then goes on to quote from the inspector's comments, which indicate to me that what the inspector was saying was not that it would certainly be the case that residential amenity would be impacted in an unacceptable way, just that the information and the noise impact assessment that had been conducted weren't adequate to draw that conclusion, because the applicant had gone on, as we've heard tonight from the representative, the applicant had relied upon overlaying data from other public houses rather than conducting a noise impact assessment and a survey of this public house during peak operating hours during the summer. So can our officers clarify whether we think that the inspector's view is that having the dwellings arranged as they were in that application, that close to the public house, was unacceptable in principle, or whether the inspector was in fact saying what the applicant would like us to be adopting as our construction of that, which is that there wasn't enough information available at the time. Because what the applicant seems to have done is to have gone away and said, inspector's wrong and we can prove it this time. So I'd be interested in knowing whether our officers are relying on a differing construction of the inspector's comments. The second related question is that the 4th page of our report talks about some of the physical noise mitigation measures that are being put in. Can our officers tell us, are these greater than were proposed the first time around? So are the measures being proposed, have they been beefed up, or are they the same and the only change is that there's been a fresh assessment made of the noise? And my third, if I may get a third, could we see detail of the 2.1 metre boundary fence? Because I'd like to look at that in some detail if that's possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Yeah, so essentially, with the inspector, really, the decision was based purely on the fact that the noise assessment that had been carried out initially, he queried certain elements of that noise assessment. So when it was undertaken, what the nature of the activity which was taking place when that assessment was undertaken, and then the comparable sites he referred to, that how they related to this pub. So what the applicants have done is they've gone away and carried out a new fresh noise assessment during peak periods, during a peak weekend when a live event was taking place in the pub. So that was like the optimum noise nuisance scenario, really. So that's what's taken place, and the Environmental Health Department have praised that, and they're satisfied that that addresses the inspector's concerns. And also they've provided additional information on those 3 public houses that are comparable to this one. So they've added to the information that's been made available. So overall, it's felt that there's sufficient information in front of us now to be satisfied that the potential impact on the proposed residents isn't going to be harmful. In terms of the mitigation measures, essentially they're similar to what was previously proposed, but because the noise assessment's been undertaken that considers that there isn't going to be any nuisance, those noise measures are things like the 2.1 metre acoustic fencing, a better quality of glazing, more acoustic glazing, so that type of thing, to ensure that if there is any noise nuisance, those measures would be in place to prevent any nuisance to the neighbours. We haven't got a specific elevation of the proposed fence, but that's something that can be, conditioned. But it would be acoustic fencing. It's not anything, from my experience, it's not anything fundamental. It's essentially a very good quality a close boarded timber fence, really. So it's no different in visual terms to a garden. It may be slightly taller and slightly more bulky, but it sort of has the same sort of appearance of a standard fence, really.
Any other councillor wishing to speak? Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chairman. It's more of sort of procedural issue, really, that I'm a little bit uneasy about. And that's the absence of a report in connection with this application from the Conservation Officer. Now, I know it's argued in the report that the application before committee this evening is a mirror of the one that was presented last year, but it's not really, is it? Because this actually involves double the number of houses. And I think I would be reassured if there had been something back from the Conservation Officer, really, which discussed the implications for the pub, which I think is recognised as being a building of some significance and standing.
Yeah, I think our conclusion is that the physical form of the proposed development is essentially pretty much identical to what was previously proposed, where the Conservation Officer raised no objections. So the form massing design is effectively, like you say, a mirror image of that. Yes, there's an increase in the number of, well, it's subjective, isn't it? You could have four executive houses with large families in, with lots of kids and adult kids with cars and things, and then you may have single people in 2-bedroom houses. It's all subjective whether the activity is going to be greater from one to the other, really. So I don't think there's much of a change in terms. The Conservation Officer would draw similar conclusions, but she's been off sick, so we haven't been able to get a formal comment from her on the application. But our feeling is that the impact on the locally listed building is comparable with this scheme to the previous one because of the physical impact of it.
The councillor wishing to speak. Councillor Hodgson.
Could I just get some information on further recycling and waste, where you're planning on putting the collection points on Ashbourne Drive, and what distances will the houses have to take their waste to the collection point? And if I could just, a second question, if I'm allowed, it's just on the noise again. If in the future we get noise complaints from the residents that have moved into these houses, could Could they force the bush to install triple glazing, extra doors, so there's double doors, there's a door and then another door? Would it change the appearance of the building? So you got double doors to try and deaden the noise of people going in and out, triple glazing and so on. Is there a danger that the listed building would be affected by any future complaints? I know that's probably a difficult one to answer, but just a comment on that, please. Thanks.
Yeah, so the bin collection point is, if you can see, oh no, sorry, it's the detached houses. On my cursor here, this is Ashbourne Road and this is the bin collection point. So all of the properties are within a reasonable walking distance with the bins of that bin collection point. Even the unit down here, it's well within that 30 metres. And in terms of noise nuisance, environmental health would, if there were significant complaints from the neighbours, they would go out and potentially do some noise monitoring to assess that impact. The thing is that the noise assessment has been carried out on the worst case scenario. So essentially when the pub's operating at full capacity with live music events, so it's sort of baked in the sort of worst case scenario in terms of noise. So we'd hope that that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But if it did become an issue, the Environmental Health Department would have powers, statutory powers, then to go in and assess it, and they should take the necessary action.
Sorry, just to come in there, there was something introduced into the NPPF a few years ago to stop that sort of situation, and it's called the agent of change principle, and it's something that environmental health look at in providing their comments on an application. So they would look at the current situation. So in this case, there is an existing business there, and they would want to be assured that the new development, in this case the residential development, wouldn't have an adverse impact on the existing situation. So the change wouldn't have an impact on the existing situation, the existing business in this case. So environmental health look at that when they're giving their comments on an application, because they don't want it to result in a situation where an existing business can be in the future then affected because a new use is being approved adjacent to it.
Thank you for that clarity, Rachel. Councillors? Councillor Hutchinson again?
Just one follow up on the noise assessment. What times of the evening was it done? Is it done 9, 10, 11, 12, 1? Do we know what licence the Bush has at the moment? Just to make sure that's, again, not going to impact the business. Thank you.
Yeah, the noise assessment was carried out over a whole weekend period. So it covered Friday, Saturday, I think maybe Sunday. It was either Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, and it included a live music event during that period. So it was operating at the worst case scenario essentially, and covering busy periods.
You satisfied with that, Councillor? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I just query something that Officer Tom Cannon said about environmental health going out and monitoring noise? Elsewhere in the ward, we've had issues with noise, and residents have been given a link to record noises before an environmental officer would go out. So I just wanted to clarify the way the officer explained it was as if environmental health would be there, sort of on the doorstep ready to act, but from my experience that's not necessarily the case, unless you know something I don't know.
No, I think that's correct. I have no experience with Newcastle, but I know other Staffordshire authorities, that's what happens is they get, so if someone is concerned, they'll get sent the equipment and then they'll do the recording and then return that to the Environmental Health Department, and I presume that's the situation at Newcastle. Yeah, so yes, you are correct in your assumption, and yeah, that's the, yeah.
Just to say my experience, they're actually given a link and they record it. They're not given equipment. That it's reliant on them having a device. So basically that puts another burden on the resident.
I think it's sent to their iPhones, isn't it? Yeah, you are correct with that.
Any other councillor wishing to speak? Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this moment in time, I can't really vote for permit this particular application, but I've also got difficulty in getting refused and put before a planning inspector. One of my really main concerns is the properties inside the development. People with disabilities will have a problem taking them in. So that puts people with disabilities will not be able to live in a reasonable way in those properties. In my experience with private roads, I call them private roads, is there's no lighting. There'll be grids and that to run away, soakaways, whatever, but there will be no lighting and people will put their own lights up and whatever. When we live in this country where from 4 o'clock in the evening till 8 o'clock the next morning it's dark and people will be dragging their bins up that private road to put them in the bin collection unit, we'll call it the unit. And I think that I suppose people all want to leave their bins at the top there and carry the bags. But again, my main concern is as people with disabilities living in that property, on all of the properties on that estate, because just people with disabilities can get assisted collection if the bin lorry goes past their property. But it's been said, and the last one of those applications, that they don't, our properties don't go on private roads. So people can't get assisted bin collections. So that's one of my really main concerns in that. And it's been shoe-owned. The properties have been shoeing onto the small development site. And at this moment in time, I certainly can't go for permits. Thank you.
Councillor. You know, the councillor wishing to contribute to this debate. Councillor Holland.
As ever, Councillor Williams galvanises me into action, although not perhaps in the direction that he would prefer. I haven't heard a proposal. I've heard councillors say that they have reservations. I am prepared to move the application as recommended, I think, in relation to refuse collections. Bearing in mind my comments on the previous application that we've heard tonight, this is an example of a situation in which it is not comfortably, physically, topographically possible to have every bin presented by the roadside, and therefore I am content with the refuse collection proposals. I'm not necessarily persuaded by the arguments presented relating to overdevelopment, although I would be interested in hearing if a councillor has a proposal to refuse on that basis. It would be novel because this wasn't something that was considered last time around. I am, I suppose, reassured by our officers in relation to noise mitigation. Looking at the plan that is displayed in front of us, you can see that existing properties that bound that pub and that beer garden are screened or partially screened from trees. It would have been nice in an ideal world that there would be some green screening going on at the boundary between the beer garden and the proposed new dwellings, although of course that would have required a bit more space. I would like our officers to look very carefully at the boundary treatment when it comes to them. I think the material needs to be as sympathetic as possible. In my view, it would have been ideal if it could have been a green boundary, because of course that will enhance the setting of the locally listed heritage asset, as well as being of benefit and amenity to those people who are going to be occupying those premises. But Final comment in relation to green things. If you look at the previous application, you can see that at the foot of one of those gardens, there's a couple of trees indicated, and no such trees indicated on the plans that are up for us to look at today. But on the basis of what I have heard, I'm prepared to move the recommendation as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Is any other comments from members or any counter proposals? Any seconding? Councillor Sweeney. Do we have any other proposals? Okay, in the absence of any other proposals, we've had it formally proposed that we accept this application as printed and formally seconded by Councillor Sweeney. Can I see those in favour of this proposal, please? Thank you. Can I see those against? Any abstentions? That is clearly passed. Thank you, councillors. The item is approved. This time in the evening when we're moving to item 9 on the agenda, an old favourite, land at Doddlespool, Betley. If councillors had a chance to assimilate and read the report contained in the pack, is there any further update to be received? Are councillors prepared to receive the information as printed and to keep the item live on the agenda in the future? If so, can I see a show of hands in support of that, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. I haven't been made aware of any urgent business this night. I have none myself. It just remains for me to say thank you very much for your indulgence tonight and your contributions. Thanks to our officers and those that have joined us online and also those present in the audience for their contributions. Have a safe journey home and now consider the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.